Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burckhardt. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is July 30th, 2025. And yes, I'm a little out of sorts today, and this is going to be very short for my added little intro and outgo bits because I'm technically supposed to be on bed rest, and I had to get out of bed to come to my desktop computer to do this, and I need to get back to bed. If you haven't seen my video on TikTok, you might be wondering what's going on. When we were away in Chile, the very first night we were there, I had a bit of an accident. I refused to go to the doctor and still went and did everything that I wanted to do, running around all over Chile with my husband and my friends and family and everybody there. And yeah, I'm kind of paying for it now. So since we've been home in Germany, I've had 2 lovely trips to the emergency room and a quick little ride in an ambulance, which was a first for me. I'd never been in an ambulance. Even with all of my health problems, I had never been in an ambulance before, so that was a new one. One more thing to tick off my never have I ever list. I am going to be okay, but I do have to have some bed rest for a while, which if you know me, you know I hate that because I've got things to do and I don't like laying in bed. But unfortunately, it is the best thing, and I'm going to go back there now. So let's just get right to the interview today, and please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt, the incredible memoir writing coach and author, Wendy Dale. The way that I like to start is just have my guests tell everyone who you are and what you do.
My name is Wendy Dale. I am a specialist in memoir structure. I wrote the memoir Avoiding Prison and Other Noble Vacation Goals, which was published by Crown. And I also wrote the Memoir Engineering System, which is the result of 15 years of analyzing thousands of memoir texts to figure out the principles that all memoirs follow.
Because you actually started out spending quite a long time teaching memoir writing.
Well, I still teach memoir writing. That really has turned into not my first love, but maybe my true love, my true calling. So yes, I am a memoir writing teacher, and I've been doing it, if memory serves, for 18 years now.
Wow, that's incredible. And I do have to say, though, your courses with coaching on your website made me hungry.
Oh, what a great way to describe it. I love that. Hungry. Good. Lots of food for you there.
Well, whenever I was going through these, I love how you have the creme brulee plan. Work one-on-one with Wendy for 6 months. And then the cheesecake plan and the photos that you have with it. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know which one I'm more interested in, the food or the courses. Because this is just amazing.
Well, I mean, we don't like to take ourselves too seriously is one of the reasons. We named all of our coaching programs after desserts because writing is hard work, but we also like to have fun. So that's kind of reflected in our course names.
Well, and I do have a little bit of information that I was trying so hard to not tell you before we did this interview because I wanted to share it with you on air.
Uh-oh.
I am actually writing my memoir right now, and I am in a memoir writing critique group.
Okay.
And in our last meeting, one of the other members was telling our moderator, who is Christina Howell with Memoir Mentors,
Christina,
who happens to be a great proponent of you and your work. And one of the other women said, hey, I picked up that book that you recommended, and she held up your book.
Oh, hysterical. Yeah, Christina is a former student of mine. I love it. Small world.
Isn't that amazing? And she had said that you had come in and spoken in her group before, and I must have missed that. But the fact that the 1 week before I'm doing this interview with you, one of my other course mates holds up the Memoir Engineering System, make your first draft your final draft. And she's using that to put together her memoir. I thought that was just fantastic foreshadowing.
Absolutely. Small world story. Yes. I spoke to Christina's group. Oh, I lose track of time. I want to say 4 years ago. So it's been a while.
Well, and I mentioned to everybody in there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm interviewing her next week. So we already have a set base audience for this interview because they're all tuning in to hear more from you.
Oh, that is so nice. Thank you so much. Wow, that's just so gratifying to hear.
Now, I do want to know with so many people, whenever they get that urge to be a writer, they always want to write that great fiction book. What drew you to memoirs?
I have to laugh because, yes, I grew up, I think, like a lot of writers, in love with books. Books were my best friends. I was kind of a nerd, and I was actually genuinely a nerd in junior high and high school, and spent most of my time with books, with fiction.
Hmm.
And when it was time for me to actually write my own book, I decided on memoir, and I have to laugh in retrospect because I thought it would be easier, right? Because I thought, well, I don't have to come up with the plot because I've already lived it. It's just, you just write down what you lived through. Well, that was a huge mistake and led me on this journey to understanding what actually makes memoir good. But back then, like many writers, I was under the misconception that your life is the same as plot, and it really isn't.
Whenever you're talking to people about creating books, so many people talk about, well, I'm a pantser, I'm a plotter, or a plantser. I mean, there's so many different ways to describe it. How important is a good, solid outline before you start writing a memoir?
I take a deep breath here because in my real life, I'm not a planner. I love, going to a place that I've never been before and just figuring it out.
Hmm.
So in real life, I am not very organized. My husband would absolutely agree with that. It drives him crazy. I really do like to think of myself as quite spontaneous. And the way I wrote my memoir was spontaneously, right? I figured it out as I was going along. So when I say, I think you know where I'm going with this. I strongly believe in outlines for memoir, and I didn't used to. And the whole spending 15 years reading thousands of memoir texts and figuring out what they all had in common made me understand how important structure is. And so when I suggest to my students, to my clients, that they outline their book first, it's not a traditional outline in the sense of figuring out your story. What we're actually doing is we're figuring out the components of your book that will create plot. That sounds really complicated. So let me explain a little bit better. In these 15 years of analyzing all these memoir texts, what I discovered were a few simple things, but one of the most important is that any work of literature, whether it's novel or memoir, consists of two components. And these components are your scenes and your transitions.
Hmm.
And they work in dramatically different ways. So the way I help people create an outline is figuring out their scenes and then their transitions. And if you do that, you don't have to spend years and years and years rewriting because you're already creating an outline that follows the basics of memoir structure, of plot.
Now, are there different types of structures for memoirs? Because you go into, I don't know, like all the different plotting softwares,
Yeah,
and you can have like the adventurer plot, or you have
yeah.
all these different ways that you can outline. But is there just one basic for memoir?
So there's a big difference between plot and formulas. And what a lot of people are calling memoir structures are just formulas. So I say a formula is a little bit like teaching someone a recipe. I'm giving you a recipe for eggplant parmesan. What I teach people are the principles that every single story that works rely on. So I'm teaching you how to be a chef. I don't believe in, there's so many things out there that really are formulas. And I'm not saying they won't get you to a good book, but your book's going to look like everyone else's.
Hmm.
What I was obsessed with for so many years, and I'm still obsessed with, is finding the principles that every single book relies on. That's how it's very different. And a lot of what people call structure is what actually is global structure, right? So I'm talking about chapter structure. I'm talking about how to actually write a chapter that works. So when people are talking about structure, they're usually talking about 3-act structures, they're talking about the hero's journey. They're looking at the book from a global perspective. Yes, that's important, but where I think people go wrong is connecting one scene to the next. Where people go wrong is the page by page of doing this. So that's really what I became more obsessed with, and where I find people go wrong, and where I have solutions. And it really does come down to scenes and transitions.
So, how important is it to understand chronology?
Very, um, in a word, right? Um, but that doesn't mean that your book has to follow a chronological structure. Understanding how chronology works in a book is incredibly important. I see people who think, well, in movies, they have flashbacks all the time, so I'm just going to jump around in time sort of randomly whenever I feel like it suits my book, and it just doesn't work. I see more people get their books off track using chronology in the wrong way than probably any other thing. So yes, you can have dual timelines, you can have books that have flashbacks, you can play with chronology, but you have to know what you're doing. So you can't just randomly have flashbacks. A lot of people think that a flashback, for instance, is, I'll get some stuff in there about my childhood. So I'll be writing the scene and I'm in Paris, and suddenly, what I really want people to know is that I had this difficult relationship with my mother. So they'll be writing about Paris, and then they'll talk about their difficult relationship with their mother in the sense that I'm sitting on the Champs-Élysées thinking about my mother and my childhood. Well, from a reader's point of view, that's a flashback, but it's not really relevant to what is happening to you in Paris. And so it gets your book off track. So a flashback isn't something your narrator is actually remembering. A flashback is a moment from a previous time period in your book that in some way is related thematically to what is happening in the scene we're currently living through. So if you're in Paris, a flashback that might make sense is remembering an earlier trip to Paris. Or if you're eating something fabulous in Paris, it might be a childhood memory of a pastry. So that's just one example of how to use chronology correctly in your book. You need to understand how a reader interprets your story.
I'm really interested in what is the first thought that pops into your mind when somebody says show, don't tell.
I have to laugh, right? First thought. First is laughter. Um, it gets me a little bit riled up. And the reason it gets me riled up is because I would say it is probably the most often repeated advice given to writers, and it's not that it's wrong. It's that it's misunderstood. And I get riled up because I see more people get their books off track using this advice in the wrong way. So I get upset because I see good writers become worse writers using this advice because they don't really understand it. And the way I see it explained is show, don't tell. Show me what your characters are feeling instead of telling me. And that to me is completely wrong. And so you get this idea of someone being angry and the bulging veins in his neck and his red face and his fist raised in the air. Now, that's okay. But especially in literary fiction and memoir, we want to know how your characters and especially your narrator feel about things. We actually want their internal monologue. We want their take on the world. So just telling me, my face turns red and I raise my fist in the air and I, slam a coffee cup against the wall doesn't really help me understand what you're feeling. You're kind of telling me what you're feeling by showing me.
Yeah.
Boy, that got way off track, right? And so now I'm really mixing up the words here. But what a reader cares about is actually not visualizing everything in your book. If you want someone to visualize your story, you should become a filmmaker. If you want someone to feel your story, now you're in the right genre. Now you're in the right medium. You should be a novelist or a memoir writer. So I think the show don't tell gets people off track because they think that their reader wants to visualize this story. A reader actually wants this emotional experience, not a visual experience. And just by describing everything that happens, you are not giving them this emotional experience. So I talk about subjective writing and objective writing in my book, and I don't know if you want to go there, but we could talk about the importance of it. Subjective writing is what gives your reader this emotional experience. Objective writing is the showing in your book, and it's actually the least important part of your story.
So, how important is dialogue in a memoir?
Right? Some dialogue is good, but I think people over rely on dialogue. Again, dialogue is part of that objective writing.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that objective writing is something that anyone would recall had they witnessed this experience. Objective writing is what I say, I explain objective writing as what a video camera would pick up. So it's anything you would hear or see. It's the journalistic point of view. And that's okay. That's especially for very commercial fiction. There's a lot more objective writing. But in literary fiction or memoir, and the prose is very similar in literary fiction and memoir, you need a lot more subjective writing. You need the reader's take, you need the narrator's point of view, the narrator's take on the world. So it's a much more internal experience. It's and dialogue is fine. Dialogue is a little bit like spice. I think it's like salt and pepper. It's not really a meal, but it can add a little bit of nice spice. But people over rely on it, and dialogue is objective. So when people work with dialogue, and when people's dialogue sounds insincere, I usually tell them, you're not a bad dialogue writer. You just need to take that dialogue and add more subjective writing throughout your lines of dialogue. So dialogue in and of itself isn't bad, but when it's just dialogue and it over relies on dialogue at the expense of subjective writing, there's a coldness to it. So I tell my writers, you always want to interpret what your characters say. So your character will say something, how are you? Well, now you need to tell me what they really mean by that. Because how are you can mean a lot of different things. We can't hear tone in a book. So if I were to say to you, Dianne, how are you? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very different thing than how are you?
Mm-hmm.
So as a person, I hear tone, but in a book, we can't. So you also want to interpret what you think that character meant by saying that. How are you? You know, I could tell she didn't mean it. She would say this to me every day. So there's your subjective writing, that you interpret what the character actually means with each line of dialogue. That's really important when using dialogue. Not against dialogue, but don't use dialogue at the expense of your subjective writing. They work really well together.
I had a question when I was going through your book, and I want to make sure that we mention this again. The Memoir Engineering System, make your first draft your final draft. In chapter 4, you were talking about, are you writing from memory in your book? How is this a problem that people deal with? I mean, aren't most
Yeah.
memoirs your memories?
I know, it sounds so counterintuitive. It goes back to you asking me earlier saying, you know, why did you want to write a memoir? And I said, because I thought it would be so easy. I wouldn't have to come up with the plot and spent the rest of my life till now really understanding what memoir plot, what memoir structure is. So writing from memory is this very problem. It's confusing your memory of what you lived through with plot. So a bunch of stuff you did is not plot. To help, as an example, we could talk about you moving to Dusseldorf, Dianne, right? So tell me some of the things that happened when you first moved to Dusseldorf. Just give me like 5 things or
Well,
3
we
or
were
whatever.
actually living in Denmark first, and my husband changed jobs to a company in Dusseldorf, and we rented a van and had to drive here. And that was the first time I had driven in Europe, and I did it in a big manual transmission van.
You're too good at this. You're actually, okay, so let me tell you actually, you're already starting to give me a story, which I love. Usually when I ask people this question, they will say something, okay, I'm living in Denmark, my husband gets a new job, we move to Dusseldorf to this great neighborhood. Then I get lost on the 3rd day, right? So let's say those were your answers, Dianne. And then I'm going to go back to what you gave me and tell you what I really liked about what you said. So let's go back to my made up answers about you moving to Dusseldorf.
Okay.
Most people will give me a bunch of what I call disconnected events. So
Hmm.
I moved to Dusseldorf, we find an apartment, I get lost one day, my husband comes home and says he got a new boss, right? It's a bunch of random stuff that you're remembering. Now, in your memory, it feels like plot. It's like, oh, that was all the stuff that happened to me when I first moved to Dusseldorf. But from a reader's point of view, it's just a bunch of random stuff that happened to you.
Hmm.
So it took me 15 years to figure out what plot actually is. And I can tell you what plot is in 2 words. It is connected events. So what I would do when I worked with someone is I would say, come up with a list of all the stuff you did when you moved to Dusseldorf. And then we would talk about how to connect all of those things for a reader so that it is plot. And there are different ways to do that, and that's probably beyond the scope of this call unless you want to talk for 4 hours. But that really is the difference between writing from memory and plot. We start with your memory. So when I work with someone, I say, give me a list of all of the things you did when you moved to Dusseldorf.
Hmm.
And then together we connect them. And so a reader is not asking themselves, wait a minute, what does the fact that your husband one day comes home and says, I got a new boss, have to do with getting lost the previous day in Dusseldorf,
Yeah.
right? You need to help your reader understand how everything you're going to tell them, everything that's going to happen in your chapter is related in some way. So let me tell you what I liked about your answer is that you made everything, as an example, about arriving in Dusseldorf is all about this new experience of learning how to drive. Learning to drive, did you say stick shift?
Yeah, it was a manual transmission, and I'd grown up driving those, but
Yeah.
never a van in Europe. I mean, to have that be the
Ah.
first thing that I had to drive in Europe was a big van with a stick shift. It's like, can we just not make these things easy?
But see, I love you're already starting to tell me a story. So for you, Dusseldorf is all about learning to drive a stick shift van in
Hmm.
Germany. You're already so you're in actually really good shape. I love your answer, but that do you see how it's different than what most people give me? It's a bunch of disconnected things they remember about arriving in Dusseldorf for the first time.
Oh, yeah, I definitely get the difference.
Okay, good. Especially since you're working on your memoir.
Yeah.
Can I ask what your memoir's about? Or is that too early?
I just refer to it as a medical memoir because it basically focuses on the year that I went through 7 surgeries in 6 months, and 6 of them were brain surgeries. And I actually
Oh,
died at one point,
oh, wow. And how long ago was this?
20 years ago.
Okay, good.
I decided after 20 years, it was
Yeah.
time to tell about it.
And I ask because I'm guessing and hoping that you're healthy now.
As healthy as I can be. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
functional
Yeah. Fascinating story.
because all of the conditions that I have are not
Mhm.
curable. They can only be managed.
Okay, I hear you. I know that a lot of people will relate to that story. So, one of the ironic things about memoir is I think the more personal you make your memoir, ironically, the more universal it becomes.
Hmm.
Because even if I haven't been through multiple surgeries in a short amount of time, I know what it's like to be scared. I know what it's like to be afraid of death. I know
Hmm.
what it's like to go to the doctor. And so when you make your story incredibly personal, I see myself in that story. I might read your memoir and have had no medical conditions or very few, but what I see is what it's like to be afraid, what it's like to fear death, and fearing death, what it's like to understand what actually matters to you. So maybe
Hmm.
that's the message I'll get from your book. Everyone will get a different message, but what's so important is to actually be really personal. Because when you're personal, I see myself in your book, even though I've led a very, very different life.
And that's one of the things I've been working up to. I've been doing like TikTok podcasts where I talk about the conditions and sort of building up to how I'm putting this all together.
Help me understand. So you're talking about you're doing TikTok podcasts as you're writing the book?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
I mean,
Good.
just talking about the conditions and how people can be advocates for other people with conditions
Ah,
that are similar, letting people understand what it's like to deal with somebody who has severe health
Yeah.
problems because not everybody does on a daily basis.
And that is one of the gratifying things about writing a memoir is helping other people. It's helping
Hmm.
people who are like you, and it's helping people who are not like you understand what it's like to be you.
And that's what my whole goal is with doing this is I'm hoping
Yeah.
that it will help people who will not have to struggle as hard as me and my family did when we were navigating all of this, not knowing anything about how to do it. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things too with a lot of other people who write their memoirs is they want to show people if you're going through this and you don't have anybody to support you going through this, I'm somebody who understands. This is how I
Yeah.
got through it. Hopefully this will help you too.
Absolutely. It's an incredibly valid reason to write a memoir. I will also say if you write a really personal memoir, you can reach people who have dissimilar experiences. So if you write something really personal and emotionally affecting, it doesn't just have to appeal to people with medical problems. I would say Wild as an example. I think sometimes publishers are way too quick to say, oh, well, what's your target audience? Well, those are the
Yeah.
only people who are going to read your memoir. Well, how many people have hiked the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we had, it was a hugely successful memoir because it was personal, it was human. So I'm not a hiker, right? I read the memoir. What I related to was the personal aspect of the book. So write a good memoir about your life, make it incredibly personal, and other people who have had experiences completely unlike yours will also relate to that book.
So, what was your goal in writing your memoir, Avoiding Prison and Other Noble Vacation Goals Adventures in Love and Danger?
I wanted to make people laugh, really. Yeah. Honestly, I started writing it when I was 23 years old, so it was a long time ago. And it was my first attempt at writing a book. I just been through a lot of experiences, a lot of really actually difficult experiences
Hmm.
traveling abroad, mostly in Latin America. And one of them was that I fell in love with a man imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit in a Costa Rican prison.
Oh,
And
wow.
I wanted to write about that and I wanted to make it really funny,
Hmm.
partly because I love humor and partly because I didn't want it to be a movie of the week, kind of
Yeah.
lifetime movie version of a book. So it took a while because I went through a lot of really difficult things. It took a while to find the humor. But I do have to say that finding the humor in this story was really healing. So I would have written a very different book now about that period in my life. The book got published, I think I was 30, I want to say. Can't remember, been a long time. um, yeah, so I would write a very different book now about that same experience. And even choosing to write this comedic version of what I lived through, it was an artistic choice. You can write the truth of your life in so many different ways. I could have written 5 different versions of what I lived through at the time, and they all would have been true. My favorite version was the funny version.
Hmm. So, do you have any plans to write another memoir?
Oh, I don't know. On one hand, I would love to because I've spent so much time studying memoir that I feel like my next memoir would take me 3 months to write.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I've fallen in love with being a memoir writing teacher, and it does take up a lot of time. So, being a memoir writing teacher is a little bit in conflict with writing my own memoirs. I really get a lot of satisfaction out of watching other people's books come to life. So now I get to see all of these books come out. I couldn't write that many books in a year. So I really do, I guess maybe like I feel like a mother to my memoir writers instead of actually giving birth to my own babies. And I'm really, at this point in my life, I'm okay with that.
Well, and I would think that Write or Flight is probably taking up a good deal of your time too. How did that come about?
Oh, so yes, that's the other thing is that I really do have this secret love of creating film. This is not film, but I studied film in Cochabamba, Bolivia, I want to say 18 years ago, and have done some short film projects and really wanted to get back into that. Partly because I love working with a crew of people. I love writing, but there's something really incredible about writing and then watching it come to life. with a lot of people on your crew helping you. It's very different than writing a book alone for years. So I do love that aspect of it. And I had this idea to do a memoir writing reality show for years, and I just didn't know what it would look like. And in January of this year, I was like, well, maybe now is the time to do that. I'd really wanted to get back into film and the film community where I live in Cusco, Peru. And I thought, well, maybe now's the time to do this. I love my memoir writing business. I love the memoir writers I work with. Maybe I could combine these loves of creating film and being a memoir writing teacher into one project. And so I started really thinking about what that would look like. And the big challenge with a memoir writing reality show is that watching people write is really boring, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like watching someone cook. Oh, it's so fun and interesting and visual and full of colors. And it's fun. Watching someone write,
Yeah.
So I started to really think about how could you do a memoir writing reality show and make it interesting, make it visual. So I thought, well, what if I brought 9 contestants to Cusco, Peru, and we could give them all of these really interesting cultural experiences, and then they would write about them. And so the writing portion of the show, I haven't edited it yet, but I think the writing portion of the show is going to be probably 20% of each episode. A lot of the show itself is people having these interesting cultural experiences, then they write about it, and each episode, one contestant gets eliminated until we have a winner. So that's kind of how it came about. Long answer to your short question.
Well, now where can people see this show when it's ready?
So it will be on my YouTube channel, which is Memoir Writing for Geniuses. It's going to be a while. It was a few days ago we finished shooting, so I'm fresh. No, fresh is definitely not the word. Yes, we just finished. We just wrapped on the shoot. My last crew person went home yesterday. So yes, it will be on my YouTube channel, Memoir Writing for Geniuses, in September. Going to take a while to edit everything down.
Well, and I do want to stress for people too, if they want to go check out writeorflightshow.com, you also have a store on there where people can get swag for this episode.
We do, yes. Buy our backpacks. Yes.
I noticed that too, that in one of the little clips that you have on your website, that somebody had that backpack. That's actually what made me go look for the store. And I'm like, can you get these?
And one of my favorite things is the notebooks you can buy, because they're going to be a huge part of the show itself. So, yeah.
Well, and I don't know any author who doesn't have like a drawer of notebooks. I mean, it seems to be a collection that every author has.
Exactly. So many notebooks. Do you ever go back and read all those notes? But I at least feel satisfied that I got it down, right?
Exactly. So now seems like the perfect time to do our 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I refuse to give up hope.
Oh, no. Okay.
Are you ready?
I guess I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
So question 1, what kind of bunnies do you have?
Oh, I love this question. Oh, don't get me talking about my bunnies. Again, I'll talk for 4 hours. So one is a mutt, the other one is a rex. So yes, they're both from Peru. So I've had Cassandra for 7 years, and I've had Nico for a year.
Whenever I was a kid, every few years we would end up with a pet bunny along with like dogs and cats and everything else, but there was always a bunny in the mix somewhere every so often.
Oh, I love it. And so I love animals and I love having pets. And my husband just doesn't like cats. I grew up with cats and I didn't want to bring animals into the house that he didn't like. So I thought, well, I don't know, what are bunnies like? And they turned out to be just such great companions and way more interesting and have way more personality than I ever would have imagined. So they're very spoiled. They sleep in bed with us, which is a little bit hard for Peruvians. I live in Peru, for Peruvians to conceive of, because they see bunnies mostly as food.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit complicated. But yes, I certainly love my bunnies and definitely do not see them as food.
Are they litter box trained?
They are. Yes, you can litter box train bunnies.
Yeah, I love that. I love that bunnies can be trained for that.
People, I know when I was a kid, bunnies were something you kept in a hutch in a
Hmm.
cage. But, as years have gone by, it's most people keep their bunnies in their house just like they would any cat, and they train them. They're litter box trained. Exactly.
Oh yeah, we're actually looking at getting one for our dog. He loves cats and he loves bunnies, so he may have his own pet soon.
Is he a small dog?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. 'Cause, yeah, you don't want a lot of dogs also consider bunnies food. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you have a small dog, it can work. Aw.
So
Well, I
now,
say I got my second bunny for my first bunny. So I
oh
was like,
yeah, you
she
always have to have
deserves her,
pairs.
right?
Question two. Do you have a writing mentor?
Do I have a mentor? The only mentor I ever had, he's passed away, was when I was 23 years old, and I started as an ad copywriter. And his name is Chuck Bloor, and he was brilliant. He was actually kind of instrumental in Hollywood. A lot of people knew him. He actually discovered a lot of Hollywood people. So he had an ad agency, mostly radio, but also TV. And a lot of famous actors actually started with him, like Christina Applegate, Drew Barrymore. I don't know if he discovered her, but I think her father discovered her. But I think
Hmm.
she passed through his offices. He at the time, now I was 23, and he was, I want to say like 70. So he was already much older than me and had seen a lot. But he really taught me how to write, I have to say. He taught me how to write 30-second radio ads. And if you ever want good training as a writer, take away the visual element. You only get 30 seconds. You have to create believable characters. You have to sell a product, and your ad has to be interesting enough to keep people's attention. So usually you have to make people laugh or cry for the
Hmm.
most part. So that was the best training I ever had as a writer. In 30 seconds, learning how to make people laugh, cry. I have no visual element, and I have to sell a product. He was incredible. He really was an incredible mentor. So yeah, that's the mentor that I have had in my writing career.
And that sounds amazing. It's like that is
He
some definitely
was.
some valuable information.
Oh, it was so great. Yeah, really incredible. So, yeah.
Question three. How do you handle stress?
Ah. Well, so I try and exercise so that I handle it better. So, right, I tend to be prone to anxiety, but I find that by exercising, it really keep it at bay.
Hmm.
So, yeah, exercise is a way to keep me sane.
I was gonna say from your website and the photos that you have on there for your classes, I would have guessed desserts.
Oh, yes. Well, no, I love dessert. Absolutely. I do. But exercise keeps me sane. I think also as a writer, many years ago in LA when I lived in Los Angeles, I remember joining a gym. And I'm not really a gym person because I really like solitary exercise. But
Yeah.
at the time, I was not really a runner. I mean, I'm really not athletic at all, but I try and exercise for my sanity. And I remember going to the gym, and it's like, why are you joining the gym? And, lose weight, physical fitness, all these options. And I was like, where's the one that says I want to write better? Because I
Hmm.
really did join a gym because I just feel mental clarity. And I think
Yeah.
it also makes me a better writer. So it keeps my stress down and makes me a better writer.
See, for me, I go play Fortnite and shoot things and destroy buildings.
Oh,
It's very
oh, that sounds
therapeutic.
good. I wish I had a more interesting answer, but yeah.
I think yours is a lot more healthy.
Okay. Oh.
Question four. What is the most exciting part about your job?
Hmm. I do get to meet really interesting people. I meet some of them are somewhat renowned in what they do. I've worked with scientists and scholars. I've worked with journalists. Some people have some renown, but that doesn't make them interesting necessarily, right? I get to learn so much about so many different fields, and I get to hear so many interesting stories. And I get to realize time and time again that people's lives are just so different, but we're all the same. I tell my writers that there are only so many emotions a human being can feel, and I'm just reminded of that over and over again. So the most exciting part of my job is meeting all of these really fascinating people with these incredible stories that are all so different from one another. But what I find the most fulfilling is the reminder that all of our stories, when you break them down, they're all the same.
Yeah, that's really quite profound in its simplicity and the fact that everybody does go through, even if it's not the same thing, you go through things that you can identify with the person next to you about something.
Yeah. We all feel the same things. There are only so many emotions you can feel. So if you can affect someone emotionally, you can really let them in on the life that you've led.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the big question about how do you do that effectively in all of your writing.
Subjective writing. Read the chapter on subjective writing in the Memoir Engineering System. I love this question, right? And I give people examples of it. But it's a simplified answer, of course. But it really does come down to that. I'm always looking for the principles that all books rely on. And one of the things I have my students do is I have them highlight the subjective writing in different books and to analyze how it's different and how the writing will make you feel a different emotion. One author might be really funny, another one might make you sort of sad. But in the end, it's subjective writing that causes a reader to have this emotional reaction to your book.
So now your last question. I've been asking everybody the same question because I am putting together a list to go in our year-end book buying guide of author recommendations for other authors. So when somebody asks you for a book recommendation, who is the first author that you always go to?
Now, see, when someone asks me for a book recommendation, I usually try and judge what that person is looking for. So I do have an answer for you. I'm not avoiding the answer, but there's so many authors I love for different reasons. So I will, if someone wants to write a sex scene, for instance, I'll say, go to Meg Wolitzer, read The Position. Or if someone wants to know how to be funny, I'll probably recommend David Sedaris. So I have different author recommendations for different reasons. My favorite author is not a memoir writer. I know that's so wrong. But my favorite author is the novelist Jeffrey Eugenides. So he wrote Middlesex, The Virgin Suicides, and The Marriage Plot. He's only written 3 books. And I love him so much because there's a darkness. I think I'm drawn to dark fiction. It's very literary without being pretentious. I read any paragraph from any of his books and I just want to eat the words. I just love his prose. I really do. And I also like there's a little bit dark. His themes are a little bit dark. So he's my favorite author.
I always tend to be drawn to dark humor, dark topics. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's too appealed to me. Well, now let's remind everybody who you are and where they can find your books.
My name is Wendy Dale. I'm the author of the Memoir Engineering System, Make Your First Draft Your Final Draft. Easy to find on Amazon. You can also go to our website. Easiest way to find our website is to go to freememoirclass.com, which will take you to the Memoir Writing for Geniuses site. I also have a YouTube channel with lots of videos. Go to Memoir Writing for Geniuses on YouTube. And that's what I would suggest. There are you seem to be better. You're better versed at where to find me than I am. I'm like, oh, that's right. There's that link too. So, it's writerflightshow.com.
To make it very easy, we're going to have all of your major social media links in the description of today's podcast, as well as on our website at burkhartbook.com/podcast.
Perfect.
I cannot thank you enough. This has been so fabulous. And, hi to everybody in the Memoir Mentors writing group, because I know they're listening.
Hi, Christina.
This has been absolutely fabulous. I know everybody in that group loves your work, and I hope that everybody listening to this who is interested in writing a memoir goes and gets it today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure talking to you, Dianne.
So there you have it, folks, my incredible interview with the amazing Wendy Dale. Please go check out all of her social media. She has got so much information up online for you to find, from her YouTube videos to her websites, her Facebook. There is so much information on how to write a better memoir. It's just absolutely amazing. You're going to love her information. So go do that, and I am going to go back to bed. If you want to find out more information about what's going on with me, check out our TikTok page, and possibly we're going to try and get it up on my Facebook, Dianne Burckhardt on Facebook. And yeah, I'm going to go back to bed. I will see you all again next week. So it's time for you all to go forth and be really happy you're not being forced to stay in bed.